Hi, this is our discussion about the Chapter 3 readings from Methods and Strategies for Teaching Students with High Incidence Disabilities. This chapter talks about working with families and transitions. Briefly, before we started recording, we were just kind of discussing our experience with transitions. Lucas, being a first-year teacher, does not have a lot of experiences, and I do not have many experiences either because this is my first year teaching middle school age students. However, we are fortunate enough that Zane, who's joining us this week, is just full of experience with it. So we're going to kind of have him sort of help facilitate this discussion and just talk about our experiences together. And we're going to go through the learning objectives to facilitate our discussion as well. So the first part of the chapter talks about why school family partnerships are important. So I guess we could talk about that momentarily as a group and our experience like forming those collaborative school family partnerships that we know are very important and kind of what benefit that brings to our job and helping facilitate that.
I can start on this one. Like I was telling you guys before we started to record, this was my third year as a middle school teacher, and I started in sixth grade with a group of boys, about 10 boys. I'm in a self-contained classroom, and they all have their primary disability is an emotional disability, and they hadn't had a really good school experience. Parents hadn't had really good experience with the school corporation. And I kind of really started off by building those relationships with the students and with the parents, gave them my cell phone number, gave them my office number, email, and said, hey, whatever works for you. A lot of them this day and age, texting is a big thing. They work different hours, different shifts. And if there's something going on with their kid at school, they can't always answer the phone right away. So if you text them, they're like, I can check my phone and see if there's anything I can answer back right away. So I've kind of have everybody's number in my phone. They're pretty respectful about not texting me too much after hours unless it's, kind of an emergency or something that I need to know. But just like being sure that I communicate not just the bad things, but the good things as well.
Yes, I say that. We just said that in our last video. Like that was my first year teacher tip to him. And it's funny that you say that because that's what was taking me so long to hop on the call because I was sending like my positive notes for the week out. So
Sure.
sorry to interrupt, but it is
No,
so
you're good. It
yeah.
is, yes. And that's, they probably have heard nothing but negative things about their child, for years. Like, oh my God, we have this diagnosis. We've been identified with this, and now we have an IEP, and these are all the things my kid needs to work on, and these are all the deficits my kid has. And they don't need to hear any more of that. They know what it is. They're well aware. So just saying the good things that they're doing and the progress that they're making. And then when you do have to have those difficult conversations like, hey, so-and-so hit this kid today, so-and-so talk back to the teacher, so-and-so didn't do so hot on this test, then they're really receptive to that. And
no, I definitely agree. I think that's so important. And then on that note too, like forming relationships doesn't just help the parents, right? But like your students are more motivated to work for you when you have that relationship with them that I think is so unique to the relationship of a special education teacher and a student. But yeah, the one thing that in the text that says that I thought was really great is that there's more to special education than helping students achieve academically. Like so much of it is just like the functional support. And really, I think when it comes down to brass tacks, just like believing in that student. Because like you said, they probably have spent their whole academic career not being believed in. So great points. Lucas, before we move on, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, that was something I took away from our last conversation. I was fortunate enough to have our principal just left. But before he left, he gave me some advice to, often you have to make that, like Zane said, you have to make that phone call with, your students not progressing or when parents are receiving phone calls, they're expecting the negatives. He tasked me with reaching out to parents twice a week, picking 2 students or just 2 instances, and giving a parent a phone call and then providing positive information. So not only does it build a relationship with the parent, but also that information is going to get passed down to the student, just as a way, especially as a first-year teacher, to let parents know that I'm here, I'm attentive to your student, and that I care, and that they're getting a picture of my student succeeding in this way or that way. And I just think that was priceless information.
Definitely.
Yes.
Awesome. Then just like moving on, we could briefly talk about it, the family's relationships with the school. That's equally important. Just going, like the text says, it's reciprocity. I said that word wrong. Trust and respect. Those are like pinnacle to school-home partnerships. And I know we've discussed how important it is, but maybe we could briefly talk about like why that's so important, because what could go wrong. Because I'm currently dealing with, or working through, I should say, a student who he's up for expulsion, and we're about to go through a manifestation determination. And this student he's an 8th grader, and from 6th to 8th grade on, there's been behavioral issues and disciplinary action taken against him. And to the point where there is no family school relationship. I'm new to this student, but it's been tough, to say the least. Like, I just had to call the parent last night and was on the phone for like 30 minutes, just like hearing, how they're out to get their student, how there's a target on the back, and just like it's been stressful, to say the least. So I guess just Zane, if you have any experience with that, like kind of what we could do as teachers to like mend that relationship with the school, because I'm not used to this type of situation I'm in, and I definitely I was nervous yesterday on the phone call, and like I don't know, I didn't feel confident, to say the least.
I think in my experience, I had that similarly with when I started in 6th grade with these students. Like I said before, they didn't really have a good relationship with any of the teachers that their students had or the school. They were frustrated with my school corporation. They kind of thought that the program that I teach is the only one of its kind in the entire school corporation, and my middle school is the only one that houses it. So any student that comes, if they're not in their home school area, they have to get bused to my school. So it's a very detailed, specific program that these kids have to meet certain criteria to be in it, essentially. It's called BEST, Building Educational Skills Together.
Are they like emotional disability kids, or?
All of them have ED.
Yeah, we have a START program at our school, and that's what it is. It's like separate. It's the emotional disability student. So
their goal is to basically, we work on their behavior. And my school calls, you probably hear, I don't know what your schools call it, but I always called it like problem behavior, negative behavior. My school calls it unexpected behavior, because there's a certain way the school expects you to act while you're in school, and then there's anything else is considered unexpected behavior. So they have a lot of unexpected behavior, and so that's kind of like interfering with their learning. So my primary goal was to do some like social emotional stuff with them, lots of social skills, lots of getting to the root, of what frustrates them about school, and then kind of working through that, and then getting them to start learning again and see that it can be fun. And I feel like developing the relationship with the parent first kind of bridged the gap between the parent and the school. Because once the parents saw that, they liked me, we developed a good relationship and a good rapport, then they were like, well, maybe the school district is, hiring decent teachers or whatever. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I'm just saying I totally the relationship that I built with that parent, then they were like, wow, they actually hired somebody that is doing something for my child. So then I did that, and then we get into meetings, and then I've gotten like compliments from parents and saying, Mr. Burden works really well with my child. Thank you so much. And so then when there is those negative things, like those MDCs that come up, like I had 1, 2, 3 this year so far. Wow. Day one, a student brought marijuana to school. So he was up for expulsion right away. So it was like really not a good situation. And mom had lost custody of him and dad had taken custody over. And this was dad's first real involvement with the school. So he was kind of like blindsided. So I had to hurry up and like try to really develop a rapport with him and explain things to him about how everything was going to go. And I just made myself available to him. And he was, frustrated with the school and frustrated with the process. So I guess the best way that I can say in my experience is kind of acting like a liaison between the parent and the school, and kind of almost, you're a representative of the school district, school corporation, but kind of almost, I don't want to say like playing devil's advocate, like, hey, off the record, this is how I feel about this, or hey, I might not agree with what the school's doing here, but there's rules and policies and procedures you have to follow.
Yeah.
So see, I'm a parent. I have an 8-year-old, and then my newborn. But it's kind of like taking off your teacher hat and putting your parent hat on for a minute, and kind of empathizing with them and going, man, if this was my kid, what would I want?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and that's kind of what was hard for me yesterday. Like I said, the conversation really pushed me outside of my comfort zone, especially because I'm not used to MDs, but just like you said, trying to empathize with them so they feel like there's one person in their corner, because it started out very combative because they've had such a bad history with the school, not just their student, but themselves, so anyway, it's definitely important. I think that we help bridge that relationship as well. And I think if we do our jobs kind of forming those relationships with their kids, the relationship with the school kind of will follow suit and go hand in hand.
Can you guys explain to me a little bit about what an MDC is? I'm sorry, I actually don't know.
Yeah. So Zane definitely will know more than me, but from what I've learned in my past 4 weeks as a teacher is, so a manifestation determination conference is what that stands for. And what it is like if a student gets disciplinary action taken against them, there's a meeting, say they're up for expulsion. You have to meet and kind of review, is their behavior a manifestation of their disability? So does that contribute to their decision-making process? And was their IEP being followed? If not, you know what I mean? What was the school doing that could have prevented this behavior? So my case is kind of a tough case because this kid has not been reevaluated in so many years. And we always say, my first day there, a teacher said to me, he's probably emotional disability. I don't think that his eligibility criteria fits him. Well, now we're going through you know what I mean? There's issues in place that I don't think we were serving him what his needs were. But because there's such a history, it's hard to describe, but it's a hot mess. So I hope you're going to end up having to do one, I'm sure, eventually at some point in your career. And I hope it's easier for you than it has been for me, because it's been Zane, I don't know if I left anything out that you wanted to add.
No, I guess so. This year was my first experience with an MDC as well. And I guess my one good thing to know about an MDC is it's literally just a meeting to have whoever is the person that's running the MDC meeting, just for them to decide whether the school district was following the student's IEP. That is it. Yeah. It is not to determine if they're expelled. It's not to determine any further suspension or any disciplinary action. It's literally just, was the school following the student's IEP as written, yes or no? And then, or was, the behavior or the incident as a result of the student's disability, like Gianna had said. And if it is, and the IEP was followed, then they can't really necessarily do anything about it. But if it wasn't, and the IEP was followed, then it's a completely different behavior, and then they can address it that way. And then if the IEP wasn't followed at all, then the school district's pretty much screwed, and they can't expel the kid or suspend them either, because if it was a part of their disability and then we didn't follow the IEP, then they're pretty much just sorry, the school didn't do what they were supposed to do. They knew what they were supposed to do and they didn't do it. So now we can't take any action. And the student just returns to school right away, and there's nothing else going on. So it's kind of a weird thing, but I understand its purpose and its function. I just think they could be a bit more, I don't know, comprehensive in the meeting and just do everything at once. Don't just have a little
parents.
Right. And I didn't know that, and I misled my parent. And this was the dad that had just taken over custody and didn't have experience with much of his students' schooling. And I was like, yeah, we're gonna go into this meeting and they're gonna, determine if we were following the IEP and find out if he's gonna be expelled or not. And then we get in there and he like flipped out.
Whoa,
Like,
no!
this isn't what I was told was gonna happen here, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, I misled you to believe this. I wasn't explained to this. Well, then like my supervisor, like my support team people were in there with me, and they knew they didn't explain it well enough to me. So it was kind of like it fell all back on them, and they were like, I'm sorry I didn't explain this to you. I'm sorry that kind of misled your parent. Anyways, it all worked out really well, and it was kind of like just a growing pain, and we worked through it really well.
That's stressful.
Yeah.
My heart aches knowing you went through that because, sheesh, that could get ugly. Wow. So, anywho, Lucas, that's the 411 on manifestation determination conferences. Then going into this next topic super briefly and quickly, it just talks about involving families in special education a bit more, like following what IDEA prefers us to do. And something that it just talks about that I see is like due process. And that is just, like if the school doesn't follow the student's IEP, they have a due process. There could be a hearing because the due process provision says that the parents and the students and the schools, they have these rights that need to be followed. I'm definitely not the most informed in this. I just know due process hearings are always something that get waved over your head as a special education teacher. It's like, you don't want a due process hearing, and that's really the extent of what I know about it in my personal career. I don't know if I'm assuming either of you have hopefully never had a due process hearing or anything like that. So that's good.
No.
And then it also talks about informed consent. So when I think about that, I think about like when we go through our ACR conference or ACRs and we discuss like the harmful effects, like that special education could have harmful effects, but we decide that the benefits outweigh the risks. That's really all I could think of. So we'll blow through that really quickly. Then this also goes on to discuss like just opportunities that we could do. We could solicit parent involvement through. So it talks about like early childhood special education and just different steps that we could be including parents in. And I'm going to keep skipping this. These were the steps that we talked about last week in more detail, but about the referral process and
Right.
how that worked. When there are disagreements, it mentions.
I'm actually going to have experience in the referral process. Now we have a student that's we're determining if they're eligible or not. So I will get to sit in on that conference and have actual experience other than textbook experience. So that should be interesting.
Well, congrats. I've only had a couple of those. So that'll be nice for you to be able to like relate that experience to what we've been reading. Then this talks about.
It's definitely good. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Definitely good to have. You can read so much in the book. Like I'm doing it backwards. Like I didn't have any schooling and I'm, just starting now into my third year. So it's kind of like I've been through all this and kind of had on the job training, I guess. And now going through and reading all this, it's like, wow, this is, I know all this stuff, but this is so nicely laid out and it really explains things like in more depth and kind of like the more of the why and how things are done, formally. So this is kind of cool. So it's definitely good that you're working while you're doing this because it's really going to help you put it all into practice. So.
Yeah, that's what I said to Lucas last week too, or the other week that we met, because the same thing with me last year is when I started my master's, and it was also my first year teaching, and it just like reinforced what I was learning. So, and then like it's funny too, it always seems to work out that things like I'm reading will apply to what I just am experiencing at work that week, like this with like disagreements and transitions and stuff. These are all things I'm dealing with this week. So it'll help you for sure. I think we could probably skip through this because we talked a lot about it last week, but these are definitely all like, steps that we talked about with the process, but family involvement should the family should be involved at every step, whether it be discussion of the progress monitoring, developing that IEP, discussing the interventions, because it's so important to have that continuity of at school and at home. Something I'm finding out this year, like each year of teaching has presented me with a new lesson, and this year it's like we could only do so much and it has to be reinforced at home. Like I'm having a lot of parents emailing me that their kids are failing and what can I do? And I'm like, I'm doing this, but you have to take these steps at home too, right? So, bridging that gap and having that parent involvement could definitely help that out. And it's important to do as teachers. So any other comments?
Nope, you're nailing it so far.
Progress reports to parents, like those we send out quarterly. We talked about that last week, Lucas. The RTI model, this is what it talks about next, was like keeping parents informed with RTI model. I think that's really important. I think a lot of parents don't even really understand what RTI is. So I don't, did anyone have comments about that? No? Okay.
No.
And now transitions. So this talks about like the big, I think, takeaway from this chapter and what Lucas and I are both really unfamiliar with, like as far as our actual practicing teacher experience goes. And that's just how we assist our students with their transitions as they're leaving school. I am surprised as a middle school teacher that it starts as early as like 8th grade. It makes sense, but there's a lot of stuff that we have to follow. So Zane, if there's just anything that you could add about what you found, like to really help you assist your students with transitions, what works, what doesn't work, etc., I would love to know.
So yeah, last year was my first experience. So it starts when their transition age is 13. So I've had some kids that were held back, and I did a transition in 6th grade with one student because he turned 13. And then I have some students that don't hit their transition until like they have a summer IEP right before they go into 8th grade. So then I'm doing it in like May before their 8th grade year is their first transition. So it's kind of weird how it all goes through. But the main thing, I mean, our school corporation offers, like, we have a special education website, and there's like basically idiot proof manuals on there on how to do every part of an IEP. And so they have all these different transition assessments. So basically you have to do 2 of them with the student. And then there's an initial parent transition assessment that you send home, or you can kind of interview with the parent if you want to do that over the phone. I find that a lot of my parents don't want to come in for that. It's easier just to do a Google Meet or call them and kind of ask them the questions, or I can just send them home the paper. And then if I'm lucky enough, I can get one of them to take a picture and send it back to me filled out or whatever. But it just kind of wants the students to start thinking about what they're going to do when they're in high school, what they're going to do post high school, what are their, dreams and hopes and fears, and what skills do they need to, achieve what they hope to achieve. So I kind of always do for my students like an initial student transition assessment, which kind of asks questions like, let's see if I can pull one up here just to really drive it home. I have a whole transition folder on my
I love that.
So let me transition the transition to here we go. Initial student transition. So there's like future vision, career interests. What kind of work would you like to do? What type of training or education will you need for this work? And then it kind of has things like college, military, I don't know, vocational school, on the job training. What subjects do you like best in school? What subjects do you dislike? What do you need help with? What can you do without help? Which accommodations help you to learn best?
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's kind of like a difficult conversation to have. Some of these kids aren't like, self-aware. Like, at this age, this is when you want them participating in their annual case reviews. This is when you kind of have conversations like, do you understand your disability? Do you understand like what you've been identified with, and kind of explain it to them. And, they're usually able to tell me it in like really harsh, like rough terms, like, I don't know how to control my anger. I don't know how to not yell at teachers, or, you know, I don't get along with my mom, or something like that. Or, you know, I'm stupid in math, or something like that, you know. And it usually translates to like, you know, okay, you have an emotional disability and you have a specific learning disability or a language impairment. So reading's tough for you. So something like that. So then we kind of start thinking about, anyway, to go back to the transition stuff. So it's just kind of like what you hope to do. What do you want to do when you grow up? What kind of job do you want to have in high school? See if they really have an idea of things. And a lot of them, you know, so they want to do like fast food or something like that while they're in high school. Very realistic job. Definitely need to have.
Share a form
What's
I have. You could keep talking, but I just, because Lucas is unfamiliar too, so I'm going to pull one up, like the one that I've been using,
Sure.
because it's hitting on all that you're saying. So I want to show it to him.
And I know we do have. So my cooperating teacher has shown me some of the transition forms she's used for her students. I know I'm going to start digging into those once I dig into my first IEP. But so I do have a little bit of experience with this. I've read through quite a few of them because she showed me a few of them, especially in high school, where it's looking more towards what they're going to do post high school. So I do have a bit of experience, but I haven't, you know, conducted one myself up to this point. But
Yeah, I guess
Well,
for me too, it's like the assessment I feel comfortable with, and that's like what we've talked about. This is what we've been using. I think we're having an overhaul of like our transition department. Like we have a new role that has been created within our districts, but it just talks about like what training they'll need, what subjects they like, what can they do without help, and then which accommodations help you learn, which I did this today. And that's funny that you mentioned that, saying, because like 5 kids were like, what does accommodations mean? So I just was like, oh, you know, it means like, what do I do that helps you learn better? Like, do you like standing? Do you like when I sit next, you know, stuff like that. So I agree that I'm noticing that, especially like with 8th graders, you kind of see that like either they're becoming more aware of their disability or they're not. And that's something that we like kind of have to help them understand a bit more. So yeah, these are just some questions, but I think my biggest thing is like, where does this go next after this? I think because we're middle school, we probably don't do as much as they would in the high school, where that's like where you're really kind of honing in on like that, like post education, employment and training, and helping them, you know, achieve like the quality of life that they wish to have. But
which I can tell has been a major focus in our high school, especially with a lot of our students ending up in vocational school. We have something called Heartland, where they can get into engineering courses or anything that's you know, a trade. So yeah, that's been interesting, but I haven't dug into one myself per se. But
yeah. Cool. So yeah, then just continue on and like trying to finish out this chapter. It also talks about like how eventually there has to be an individualized transition plan. With that, like Zane, so going off of that, and Lucas, that's more so in high school that they do the transition plan, like at least at your guys' district.
Yeah, I haven't heard of like the individualized transition plan.
Me either. So it has to be beyond our realm.
I'm just looking at my IEP. Do you guys use the IEP system for your IEPs too?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So, like right now, mine just at the kind like what education and training after high school. I want to do this. Employment after high school. I want to do this. Talking about independent living skills right now. If they don't have appropriate independent living skills, then we need to put in a goal for that. And then kind of just a transition service that I put in for the first year is like, so-and-so will complete an online career research on different career paths in whatever area they've expressed they want to work in. Like I've had some students that say they want to be lawyers. And it's like, you don't want to like burst their bubble or crush their dream, but it's like, man, you can't really write a paragraph right now. I don't really think being a lawyer is in the cards for you. But not to say that stranger things haven't happened, but you know, once you're in 8th grade and you're moving into high school and you still struggle to manage your behavior. You know, how are you going to be in a courtroom arguing with a judge and not like freak out on them? It just doesn't seem, you know, so it's like, I try to like put it in perspective, like, you know, so let's do an online career research. Let's see what it entails. Are you prepared to go to school for like 6 to 8 years or whatever it takes to be a lawyer? Is that really what you want to do? Because you hate school now, but now you're going to have to do a lot of school. So it's just like things like that. Do you really understand what's involved in the career that you want, that you aspire to be involved with? So that's kind of the first transition, like service or task, is the career research. So they kind of really understand, is this really what you want to do? Or then most of them will do the research and say, I'm not interested in doing that anymore. It's too much work. And some of them are very realistic from the beginning, and they're like, oh, I'm just going to work at McDonald's for the rest of my life. And it's like, well, I think you can shoot higher than that, but that's definitely a great thing to shoot for when you're in high school and college. If you decide to go to college or trade school or whatever you want to do, you know, maybe McDonald's is for you and you want to work your way up the chain and become a manager. Great. Awesome. Let's explore it and see what it has, you know, what's involved.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go for it, Gian.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say that I think the big takeaway is just like making sure that we're just assisting and facilitating our students to like live a meaningful life, whatever that means for them, you know, whether that's McDonald's, whether it's maybe not being a lawyer, but maybe doing something that they could use like their deductive reasoning skills, you know, just finding what works for them. What were you going to say, Lucas?
I've been really fortunate that Wabash, I've noticed when I was in high school, there was a huge push to go to college. You know, everything was based around college. I've seen in a lot of, and I don't know if, like you said, it's not necessarily a transition plan. It's what do you want to do after high school? There's been a big push for trade and vocational skill type positions. It's just been interesting because it wasn't my experience that I had. It was a lot of, you must go to college, got to go to college, got to go, you know, that was the big push when I was in school.
Me too. Mm-hmm. How old are you, Lucas?
Other ones.
23.
23. Wow, a young pup, huh?
Yeah, I'm definitely the young one around the building.
I'm 35, so I feel, and I'm still the young one in my building. A lot of these are, you know, middle-aged women that I work with, so it's like having a male figure in the special ed realm is like gold for them. They're like, oh, we're so happy to have a male figure, especially for in my school corporation. That, you know, it's the lower socioeconomic classes. A lot of them, unfortunately, don't have father figures around, so it's kind of like multi-purpose for me. You know, to have a trusted male adult, you know, figure for them is very important. So
that's kind of what I've been basing my year around. Is there is a lack of males in the special ed realm in general, and
you guys are unicorns.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting because my school is actually primarily male in terms of just even general ed teachers. But yeah, it's definitely, it adds something. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. Side note, I just saw something that was so confusing. We'll get back on topic really quickly, but in the transition, it says the individualized transition plan, and then it goes, note here, the P stands for plan, unlike in IEP. Do you guys know IEPs as anything other than individualized education plans?
Program, maybe? I'm not sure.
Program plan? I don't know. I think of it as plan, but I guess the more you know.
Yeah, no, I always thought that IEP stood for individualized education plan.
Okay, I'm glad I'm
not.
But
I guess now it's an individualized education program.
Yeah.
So.
Look at us being more educated.
Individualized education program is what it says.
Yeah. Quick Google search told me that. So I mean, I think maybe I've heard it referred to as their IEP plan. So maybe it's their individualized education program plan is their actual document.
You're right. Okay, look at us using our brains. All right, so we'll just go through the rest of this really quickly. The next part of it talks about like, you know, the like transitioning out of school. It does mention like expulsion and things like that. So we already touched on manifestation, determination, and things like that, and how, these removals can affect our students, and why it's important that we're supporting them throughout the entire process of school and as they transition out of school. Then it talks about some post-secondary options, which I think we touched on, that it's not necessarily just like a 4-year college. There's 2-year colleges, on-the-job training, trades, things of that nature. Then it just talks about, after that, the text discusses documentation needs and how, they need to have a summary of performance for students who do not receive a reevaluation prior to exiting secondary education. That is also new to me. The more you know, I don't think that's something, Lucas, that you will deal with at the high school level, more so than Zane and I at the middle school level. Then it just talks about transition goals and plans, self-determination, which we talked about when we talked about letting our students make their own choices and kind of helping guide them, but really, letting them have that independence. And Zane, like you said, even including them in their ACRs and their conferences, because they're old enough to start taking accountability and making their own decisions. I'm going to keep going. Self-advocacy. That's something I work on my kids. I don't know if we wanted to talk about that really quickly, because then we've pretty much blown through the chapter. But just like, I think that's a good note to end on too, self-advocacy and why that's so important for our students and ways that we could help foster that within our students.
Yeah, it's really tough for a lot of my students to kind of not let it's part of their disability, right? They have emotional disabilities, not let their emotions get the best of them and kind of take over their reasoning. A lot of them, I have behavior goals that are something simple as, when student A begins, to get frustrated or notices that they're getting frustrated, they need to request a break in the designated cool down area, which is my classroom. So it kind of like being able to have those skills to say, hey, before I freak out, I need to leave the room. I need to go in the hallway. I need to go for a walk. I need to go talk with a trusted adult. I need a break from whatever is that's frustrating me. And for some reason, you can do training with them over and over again until you're blue in the face. I don't get a lot of results with it. And I don't know if as an educator, I need to dig deeper and think of different ways, because clearly they're not raising their hand. They're not going to the trusted adult. A lot of them, when they're out in the general education setting, they're so embarrassed to have a para with them. And I'm at the stage where the boys that I have out in the gen ed setting, they're out all day, and I have a para for like 2 or 3 of them, and he doesn't get up in their face. He doesn't like sit right by them. He just sits in. It's almost like he's a co-teacher in the room. And there's other kids that are identified in there that don't need to be in the self-contained classroom kind of. And he's just kind of a person in there as a resource. And all they would have to do is just say, raise their hand or go to that para and say, hey, I need to take a walk. Hey, I need to go in the hallway. And they just don't do it. And they just keep letting their emotions get the best of them and make these poor choices and get themselves in trouble. So that's self-advocacy is a huge thing. And I, do all kinds of social emotional learning, social skills training in my advisory class, twice a week. So it's like, they know it when they're calm, but when they're not calm, they just can't use those skills to make the right choices. Very, very seldom.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. I guess just like kind of piggybacking off of that with my experience, I also have kids who will just sit there and struggle instead of raising their hands. So, I think these tinier instances of self-advocacy are important, because then when it comes to things like their transition, they are able to self-advocate. So it's important, right, that we do this all the time with them. Just things that I do in the beginning of the school year, I always do a conference with my students and talk about which best ways they how do they want me to communicate with them, and how do they want to communicate with me, what they need help. And I had a student who I have a soft spot for, but he's had a rough life, and he told me don't ever call me out, you know? So I guess in a way that was him advocating for himself, like pull me to the side, and that's good enough for me, right? So, and then I think when you do little things like that, then they feel more confident in you and your ability to help them, and then maybe they are willing to like speak out and be more upfront and vocal about their needs. And then as far as what you said is like the things not working, I'm sure you've done all this, but just like positive reinforcement for when they do ask for a break.
Right.
And you know, like, I mean, if you were to Google it that or research it, right, that's what it would tell you, like positive reinforcement of that, not letting them, you know, their negative or unexpected behavior, like your school says, grant them what they want, which is a break. So I don't know. There's a lot. I think you being in that behavior management class that you're in right now will really can help you sort of piece that together. Because essentially you have to reprogram the brain, right? Like their brain is wired a certain way and you have to
Right.
kind of get them to react differently. It's not an easy feat at all.
The big struggle I have right now is I'm getting like close to it with most of the students. They're doing the behavior that I want them to, like removing themselves from the situation, going in the hallway. But they also, some of them have like some elopement issues, like, you know, leaving the classroom and trying to go out of the school and things like that. So it's like, all I want them to do is say, hey, I need to go in the hallway for a minute, right? You don't even have to like say why you're going in the hallway or what you're doing in the hallway. Like we're talking about it now. We have it worked out. When you get upset like that, it's okay to leave the room and take a break, but I just need you to let me know where you're going. Like, don't just leave the room because then I think you're running away and then I have to follow you and then you get more mad because I followed you.
Yeah.
But you're just leaving the classroom and you're sitting outside the door for 5 minutes to get a hold of yourself, and you don't need an adult sitting there babysitting you or like trying to talk you down because all it's going to do is make you more mad. Then I just need you to say like, hey, I'm going in the hallway. Great. And then I'll just peek out the door, make sure you didn't run away, and then we can talk about it later. But like they're
Another
just getting up and leaving.
question, which I'm sure you've done, but like, have you thought about maybe making them like passes so they don't have to vocalize that to you and instead could just like easily slide that to you and dip on out of there?
They have like, I made like a bathroom pass. It's like a wooden pass and it has my name on it or whatever, and they use that to go to the bathroom. So I guess I could probably use that and they could just have it and, you know, walk over and take it and then go out of the room. So that might be a good solution to think about.
Just something to try. I don't know, but like I've seen kids that sometimes them saying that, or if they don't want attention on themselves, like
Sure.
mid panic, they might not want to say, I really need a break right now. So it might just be like a baby step for them. You know what I mean? Seeing that there's a
Right.
better way to get that break. But if you know that push to make them vocalize it is too far, you could maybe take a step backward. That's just my like so my background, and Lucas and I talked before we wrap this up. But so my background is actually in behavior management and like behavior analysis. So that's kind of like my cup of tea in special education. So if you ever have questions, just especially about like the text or your other class, just let me know.
Sure. That's actually my background also. I came
Oh,
from, I was a registered behavior technician doing ABA therapy with adolescents with autism. So I did that from 2013 until 2019. So, and my wife's
wow.
actually a BCBA. So she,
Cool. That's what I was going to school for before I became a teacher. So
yeah, I
awesome.
thought about going to school for that. And I said, that seems pretty hard and time consuming. Not that this is
A lot of hours.
too
That's exactly why I
but
became a teacher. But I probably am putting in more hours as a teacher, to be honest with you. So good for you too.
What advice would you guys have for me? I have some. This has kind of been my biggest struggle this year. I have some students that will advocate for themselves, like explicitly. I know exactly what they want. They need to perform throughout the day, and they're very open. But I have some students that are very closed off, and it's not that they have any emotional disabilities. It's just that they're unwilling to communicate. I mean, essentially anything. I have one student in mind who I've been working with all year long just to get to open up to me about any way that he can advocate for himself or any of his wants or needs or what I can do or what we can do to basically just get him to tell me what it is that he wants or needs that can make him a more productive student. And it's really, really frustrating because I really like the kid. I just don't know how to figure out what it is that he needs because he will not communicate. It's all very superficial information.
Yeah. Well, like I would just start small, right? Like if you just know that you're someone they could trust and you're on their team, which I'm sure you're doing day in and day out, but sometimes that's like it takes longer with some students. I'm finding that out myself. I've never had an issue building a relationship with the student. I like consider that to be one of my strongest skill sets as a teacher, but I do have a student who is rolling her eyes at me and like, whatever, I don't care. I'm putting her feet on the desk. And I reached out to a veteran teacher and that's what she said, like, just start small, like interests over like music that she likes. So I actually emailed the dad and said like, what are some of the students like, really like highly preferred things. So I could try and like incorporate that into my daily interactions with her. So doing something like that, sorry, my dog. And then, so starting small like that, but then also considering like how you're trying to communicate with the student. Like I said, maybe they don't want to communicate with other people around. Maybe it would be better for them to communicate with you via email, and this is off topic of transitions and everything we're talking about, but I had a student who for a few days I was noticing was really off. And I kept asking her because I'm pretty close with her. So even a student that I have a very close relationship with didn't feel comfortable talking to me about it. She typed it all out and showed it to me. Well, it was that she was having suicidal thoughts, so I ended up having a report and she got a risk assessment and all these things. But I guess my point is like, they don't have to vocalize it to you. They could communicate with you in other ways. So if it's emailing, just you kind of have to use like your people skills and your teacher skills to figure out what will work for that student. Do you have any?
He's very verbal with me on anything off topic. So we're both baseball guys. So we've got a great relationship. It's just once it gets down to brass tacks of, we need to do this and get this done, it's really hard to get him to communicate. Which I think that's maybe he doesn't want to verbalize that in front of other people, but we've had time alone too, and it's just been really frustrating. I know his former middle school teachers have basically sent me an email saying it takes a long time to crack his shell open, but it's just been like a real challenge for me because I know he has potential, but I just can't get into we become friends, but now I'm trying to move into, well, how can I help you succeed? And it's just been wildly frustrating.
It doesn't sound to me like you're doing anything wrong. I would just like, if you've solicited feedback from his previous teachers of record, think about what they're doing and then maybe try to change it up a bit. You know what I mean? Like if it's still like, you got to try and do something different because it seems like it hasn't really been him. You know what I'm saying? So, Zane, I don't know, do you have anything to add? Especially that you're a guy, I feel like you might be able to.
Yeah, no, I just, I don't know. Do you have your own classroom?
My schedule is strange. Sometimes I'm co-teaching. I have 2 of my own periods and then an advisory period.
Okay. I didn't know. So mine is just different. It's just all about kind of the culture that I developed in my classroom with all of my boys. Like, people would say, oh, describe your classroom. And I always say, it's cliche, but like work hard, play hard, right? Like we do our work in here. There's a lot of behavior expectations, but as long as you do everything that I ask you to do, you can do whatever you want. Like I have carte blanche pretty much in my room. Like my students get to use their cell phones. Other students in the school don't get to do that. Like I have a really good relationship with the administrators. I've carved out relationships with the gym teachers. One of the gym teachers is actually my cooperating teacher. And I just wanted a completely different, not special ed viewpoint. He's been a teacher for 25 years. We have very similar interests, like outside of work. And I just said, hey, I would love for you to be my cooperating teacher for a different point of view on things. So like if my students get done doing their work in my room, they're allowed to go join whatever gym class is going on and shoot hoops and do stuff like that. So it's like, I've set up really, really heavy reinforcement things for them to make them want to work hard to get what they want. And then kind of also, it's a little more lax. We joke around. We have a lot of fun in my room. Like, and I guess it sounds like you're developing a good rapport with the student, but I would just suggest keep going with that, get deeper, get more. And then,
Yeah,
and then eventually they're gonna just, you'll have them eating out of the palm of your hand. They'll want to come to you with those things and stuff like that. Like I had a student today that was in class, he walked out, and I had him in 6th grade, and he didn't show up at all in 7th grade because of the pandemic. I thought he was gone, and he showed up this year, and I hadn't seen him in a year. And I've had just a few weeks with him, and there was something going on at home, and he left class and was upset. And he said he didn't want to talk to the social worker or the para or anybody else, but he wanted to talk to me. And it's like, I didn't expect him to say that he wanted to talk to me. I didn't really think that I had really done too good of a job building a rapport, a relationship with the student, because he's particularly difficult. I mean, we all have those students that we kind of just don't click with, and he's one of those for me. And for him to sit there and say, oh, I want to talk to Mr. Burden about this, I was like, okay, let's go talk about it, like whatever's bugging you. So it's like what you're doing. Just keep developing the rapport, keep, being friendly with them, and letting them know that you're in their corner and that they can trust you, and that, make them want to do the work for you, make them want to, I don't know what kind of reinforcement you have set up with a kid, but if he's having trouble doing his work for you or whatever it is, I don't know, maybe you need to reevaluate what his reinforcement strategies are and what's going on with that. I'm not sure.
And it's kind of why I got out of sales and got into teaching. Is I'm really good at, I can build relationships with students. Now it's, not just building a relationship, but then also finding out what way I can get them to, not just build friendships and relationships, but also work at the same time. Because I totally don't, it's common, you'll go through the school and some teachers have such a rigid and restrictive environment, and that's not what I want.
Yeah.
I had a lot of experience with that in the past, and it just doesn't seem to be productive. So it's a comfortable environment, but I also don't want it to be too comfortable to the point where they're not doing work. But at the same time, like you said, if you have that relationship with them and that trust, then they do work for you. Or I've seen that in work with some of my students. I want it to be a comfortable area where we're not just, brass tacks all the time.
Have you tried working with him one-on-one with the assignment, like removing him from the class, just like almost like an ambush, like, hey man, grab your stuff, let's go take a walk, and then go take a walk, and then go somewhere in a common area where there's not really anybody around, and then just say, okay, and then just act like supernatural about it. Okay, let's go over this assignment together, and like just see if removing him from the environment, maybe he's, trying to put on a show for the other kids or something. It's highly possible.
That's something I haven't tried. We have like my resource class with him is really small. So we have he knows, and I know, both of us, every single day, he has 20 minutes of my time. He always goes and sits back in the corner up on the table, and we work on assignment one-on-one, where it is kind of private, but not totally private. So that might be, I have a room where we can go and, we can be one-on-one, so there isn't that distraction or him trying to, mess around with other students. But yeah, that'd be interesting to see how he responds to that.
On that note too, like something, like I said, like Zane said, I think you're doing everything right. Keep up, don't get discouraged. Another thing too, like maybe he doesn't feel confident in doing it. You know what I mean? You have him in high school, like think about how many years of maybe feeling like he cannot be successful even if he tries. So that's just like a defense mechanism. You know what I mean? So again, starting small with that, because I have a student right now actually so we just did NAWIA testing. I don't know if you guys do NAWIA. He's failing math. He hates math. Tells me all the time he hates math. Called his mom and I talked. He hates math. That's what I get out of it. This student and I have developed a good relationship, and from what I've heard, he's really hard to develop a relationship with. And so we did NAWIA, and I got a score. He's like in the average to above average range for his score for a subject that he's failing. You know what I mean? I just don't even think he knew he had it in it. And once he realized that, I was like, will you start coming down and trying to work on math with me? And he looked at me and he was like, yeah, I will. You know what I mean? But that was the most I got out of him. He is on the spectrum. He's another one who will just talk to me about his interests, which I love doing, right? Because that's what we do as teachers. We want to talk to kids about their interests and form those relationships. But then it's very off topic and it's like an avoidance thing. Like he wants to like escape the test. So we just talk about bands. He doesn't have to work on math, you know? But then, like I said, once he realized that it is something he can be successful in, that kind of stopped. I'm not seeing the task avoidance and those, you know, those mechanisms that he's developed to avoid something that he really thought he was bad at and that there was no point in trying because he didn't think he'd be good at it. So that's just what I was going to say too. Maybe it's just like, I don't know if you're seeing that in all subjects or just a specific subject, but if it's just a specific subject, then I would say that it's probably like a lack of confidence.
I think you made an interesting point that just made me think about his last name. I know throughout school is tied to, he's a, let's just say, I'll use my last name. He's a Helton. And that last name carries the, oh, I'm not going to partake in school, or us Heltons, we don't necessarily care about high school. And teachers have treated him that way too.
Exactly. And think about that, like going back to our previous discussion the other week about unconscious bias. You know what I mean? Like that's a thing that really does have an effect on students. So that could very much be it, that he has never had a teacher who's believed in him, who has wanted to put in that time because they've thought, why bother? You know what I mean? So I think just persistence. I think you're doing everything right, Lucas.
He's smart, and I've seen him. So he had to do a test correction today. And when we sat down and he was completing his test correction, he knew all the steps. He will sit through class and just not partake and leave the whole test blank. So I'm just constantly pushing you're smart, you know, we can do this, and just trying to positively reinforce him to verbally constantly that he's not, you know, I'm not gonna say your last name doesn't, you know, define you, but
you're saying you're more than what you think.
Yeah.
On that note, too, then I would say that you also need to make sure you have support from his general education teachers. That it's not just you, because you can only do so much, Lucas. Like that's something I'm finding out this year too. That special education teachers sometimes we try and take on the world, but they have to believe in him too, because they're in his classroom most of the day. I mean, he's in their classroom, is what I mean. So if he just only feels comfortable coming to you, like that's great, right? But we want that to go out into these other environments. So I would just say I would try and keep in contact with them and just say, you know, this is something he's struggling with. I think it's a lack of confidence. If he does one thing right in your classroom that day, I want you to make a scene out of it. You know what I mean? Like not necessarily that maybe he wouldn't be receptive to that, but really let him know how great it was. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, and just baby steps.
Thanks. Yeah, because it has been discouraging, but it's, you know, it's part of the process of learning.
No, for sure. I mean, we get discouraged as teachers almost every day, but you just got to keep trucking along, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. I think we've covered the chapter. I think we did a really good job. We didn't like dive too deep into like the ins and outs of, you know, the formality of it, but I think we've covered all the big aspects, which is just why it's important for us to build relationships with our students, why it's important to support them throughout from the moment they start in special education to when they're leaving it, and why advocacy is so important and how relationships can affect their ability to advocate for themselves. So if you guys have anything else to add, let me know. My cat and dog are fighting, so I apologize. I think this is a good stopping point. So all right. Well, thank you to whoever watched, and let us know if you have any questions.